Danny Phantom was Butch Hartman's second cartoon that premiered on Nickelodeon, but it certainly wasn't treated as a second-class show. While it may not have reached the same lifespan as that of the Fairly OddParents, it was many kids' first exposure to superhero shows and became a cult classic among fans. With the show about evil spirits and the multitude of hunters who try to stop them, we knew we had to try to figure out who was the most good and who was the most evil. So we asked ourselves, who needs to be saved and who needs to be put to rest? Let's go ghost and find out, huh? I'm Brad with WickedBinge, and this is Danny Phantom, good to evil.
Going ghost!
Starting off the list is Danny's mother and the most competent ghost hunter in the main cast, Maddie Fenton.
We better start moving in case those ghosts come back.
With a deep passion for stopping evil spirits and an even deeper passion for protecting and caring for her family, it's not much of a shock she's the biggest force of good the show has to offer.
Good night, Danny. I love you.
Throughout the show, she's one of the only characters who's never shown any real ulterior motives and is very straightforward with what she believes in.
Flying at that altitude, in the open, at that speed?
While she's not always the most pleasant toward her husband Jack, it should be noted that Jack is the one who typically starts conflict between them. Otherwise, they have a very happy and loving relationship. The only major character she shows any real malice towards is Vlad, but that's mostly due to his constant flirting and desire to split her and her husband apart. Really, any of her actions toward the rest of the cast are almost always justified in some way. With the love she shows towards Danny, Jazz, and Jack, and her need to rid Amity Park of evil with very little compensation, she's an easy pick for the most moral character on Danny Phantom. Next up is the second woman of the house and Maddie's daughter, Jazz. While Jazz lacks the selfless need to put herself in danger for others that Maddie has, she abides by a very similar set of standards and is always willing to be of help to those around her.
If anything ghostly happens today, we three will handle it.
She's an incredibly smart model student at Casper High and even tutors the less gifted students in her spare time. At times, she can be a bit overprotective, bossy, and obsessive when it comes to being right.
I'll take being right and embarrassed over being wrong every time.
With the pressure she often puts herself through in order to be a positive role model and big sister to Danny, she often tries to repress her own childish desires for the sake of setting a good example. The way that she displays her love for her family is a bit more strict than Maddie, and even leads to her trying to stubbornly correct the flaws she sees in them. But as the show goes on, she learns how to accept them for who they are.
Great. You figured out how to put the Frank back in Frankenstein.
Even when she finds out that Danny is secretly a ghost, she helps him keep his secret under wraps, even going to the extent of joining him and his friends while they go ghost hunting as extra support.
You can tell me when he's ready.
She may not be the best hunter in the family, but her support towards her brother and her development over the course of the series keep her firmly near the most good side of our ranking. Following close behind is the main character, and the person who's done the highest amount of good deeds on this list, Danny Fenton. When Danny was granted superhuman abilities, one of the first things he wanted to do with his new powers was to keep his town safe from evil. Despite only being a teenager, Danny shows a lot of bravery in standing up to even some of the most powerful ghosts in Amity Park.
Well, one down, a billion to go.
Though the responsibility he holds as the only real line of defense between his town and the ghost zone often takes his toll on him, and sometimes make him want to get rid of his powers entirely.
I don't have my ghost powers anymore! I'm normal again!
Danny is also frequently hunted by his own parents, due to them not knowing that Danny Phantom is actually Danny Fenton until the final episode of the series. Danny's still young, so him not always wanting to be a superhero is understandable. However, there are still many other times where we see a more evil side of him manifest. He's a very vengeful person when he wants to be, often abusing his powers so that he can play pranks on people he doesn't like, or who have hurt him in some way, like the time he put toilet paper in Dash's locker.
It's like Dash, but with better breath.
He's also not a stranger to throwing the first punch or attacking a ghost unprompted. His actions can often be very rash, and he doesn't always think things through before he dives headfirst into a situation. His biggest wrongdoing, however, is in the episode The Ultimate Enemy, where he steals the answers to the biggest test of the school year, unknowingly setting up a much darker future than he imagined. But we'll get back to that later on this list. Overall, Danny's an average teenager with a lot of baggage, and he doesn't always use his gift responsibly. He's definitely the biggest hero on the show, and you can probably argue for him being higher on the good side, but we feel that his more questionable actions bring him down on the list at least a little. Despite her appearance as a rebellious, stereotypical goth girl, Sam Manson is a lot nicer than she seems, and is a very loyal friend to Danny. Even though she's the love interest, she can occasionally be very cold and moody towards people, but it's typically within reason.
Does he have to take off his pants and act like a dweeb? Or will either one do?
This is most noticeable in how much she contrasts with her parents, and their many attempts to change who she is to their benefit. She has a very I told you so attitude, and is much more rough than a majority of the human characters.
Never is Karma's doorbell. Ding dong, it's for you.
She does occasionally blackmail or belittles her friends, but these instances are fairly few and far in between. What really sets her back from being the most well-rounded character on our list, however, is her tendency to force her ideals on other people. Though they may typically be for a good cause, such as her Save the Frogs campaign or the vegan rally she organizes, they can often come at the detriment of others. She also likes to rebel against her squeaky clean rich parents, like when she and Danny snuck off to watch Circus Gothica without their permission.
Will you quit messing with my parents? That's my job.
Still, she's a caring friend who's always got Danny's back and is one of the most sensible characters in the series. Next up is Danny's clone cousin, Danielle. She's only appeared in a couple of episodes, but she's a fan favorite and led to one of the darkest storylines Nickelodeon has ever produced. Being a failed experiment made by Blad in search of creating a perfect clone of Danny, Danielle has almost all of Danny's powers, along with a slightly more mischievous personality.
Did I do good, Daddy?
You did excellent, child.
Being raised by the main villain of the show, she started out as Vlad's evil sidekick in order to capture Danny and get the last piece of DNA they needed to make her complete. But when she figured out that Vlad never actually cared about her, she made her jump back to the side of the good. What puts her lower than Danny is easily her first initial encounter as a villain, along with her tendency to steal and cause trouble with her ghost powers. Though she is younger than Danny and has less of a concept of the power she holds than he does, it was a bit of a tough call, but Danielle has very few good deeds to balance out the bad, so she ranks slightly lower than her cousin. Making our way to the more questionable characters on the show, we have Danny's father and the last member of the Fenton family, Jack. While he's still a caring father, he's not nearly as well put together as the rest of his family. He's loud, abrasive, and a bit of an idiot.
Next time, think before you act.
He can often set a bad example for his kids and embarrasses them whenever he gets the chance. His love for ghost hunting usually gets in the way of everyone else and can lead to destruction of public property or making bad situations even worse.
Need for competent ghost hunters? What is that supposed to mean?
He's oblivious to the fact that Vlad hates him and blames him for ruining his life due to a miscalculation he made back when they were in college that ended up giving Vlad his ghost powers. In fact, it's his own ignorance that allowed Danny to recklessly go through the Fenton ghost portal and gave him his powers too. Though he loves his kids and simply wants to protect them, as well as the town, it's his shoot first, ask questions later mentality and the fact that he managed to accidentally ruin 2 of the lives of people close to him that brings Jack down in our ranking. Rounding out the main cast is the techno geek, Tucker Foley. As one of the main sources of comic relief and secondary best friend to Danny, he's arguably the most reliable and supportive member of Team Phantom.
Me? I've got charm, good looks, and modesty.
His knowledge of gadgets, the internet, programming, and anything else technology related can often be the deciding factor that gets Danny out of tough situations. Being the same age as Danny gives him a lot of the same questionable traits as him, such as his need for vengeance, as well as his lust for the ladies, especially Paulina. However, Tucker's main flaw, and a common theme between him and Danny, is his jealousy of his ghost powers.
Yeah, but none of that would have happened if I wasn't jealous.
There have been several times where Tucker's envy or desire to be appreciated has gotten the best of him and resulted in havoc being wreaked on the town. Most notable is when Desiree granted his wish to be just like Danny, leading him to use his powers for the sake of his own personal gain. There's also the time that Tucker gained power from an ancient scepter, which he used to enslave everyone in Amity Park. While these instances were enhanced by other ghosts, it's his own selfish desires that caused these events to happen in the first place.
Any other edicts, my king?
Yes! Miniskirt Fridays.
At his core, he's a good person and a great friend and sidekick, but he's shown a lot more malice than the rest of his friends, making him a bit harder to argue for in comparison. Next up is Valerie. The popular kid turned ghost hunting outcast has a lot of emotional baggage and a grudge against ghosts that probably won't get better anytime soon. When she was first introduced, she was nothing more than a side character and another girl for Tucker to try and fail to flirt with. But when one of Danny's fights led to her family going broke, we got to see more of her development and how she wants to make every ghost pay for ruining her life.
You're not just fired, you're ruined.
She's unknowingly helped major villains before, such as Vlad Masters and Tecna, and her goals aren't exactly the most noble. While her intentions aren't as pure as the characters ranked above her, you can understand where this deep hatred comes from and why she'd want to get revenge for her and her dad. Her relationship with Danny, while short, managed to show a more caring and considerate side to her that we never got to see before.
Pretty cheesy, Neil Armstrong. You got lunch plans?
Not enough to make her a hero, but enough to keep her as possibly the most neutral character in the cast. Next up is a bit of a weird pick, but we had to mention Sidney Poindexter, mainly because he's quite possibly one of the most understandable pure ghosts on the show when it comes to his goals.
And you're using your powers for evil?
When he was still alive, Poindexter was bullied mercilessly and stuffed into his locker every day at school.
Apparently picking on him was a graduation requirement.
This happened so often that eventually, his soul was embedded into the locker's mirror, creating a small gateway between our world and the Ghost Zone, one of the first to be discovered in universe. Ever since Poindexter died, he's held a strict grudge against bullies, and eventually takes over Danny's body when he believes him to be a bully.
Put an egg in your shoe and beat it, bully!
For a ghost in a show where almost every ghost is evil, Poindexter is one of the only ones with a real backstory and motives that range outside of taking over the world. He just wants to help out the little guy, which in the end kept him from being on the truly evil side of our list. Next is one of the most sadistic characters who isn't a ghost, Baxter. As the stereotypical school bully, he makes the lives of Danny and many of his peers a living hell.
This could be a new record, but there's still room for more.
He has very few emotions outside of anger and smug satisfaction, which leads to him picking on the weaker students at Casper High. He's not too bright, and even though he's a strong athlete and team player, he's cowardly towards even the weakest of ghosts. Dash serves the role as a simple antagonist for Danny during school, and it's because of that he doesn't really grow or change throughout the series, making him your average bad guy and leading to his fairly low placement. Going back to the ghost, we have easily the weakest one in the Box Ghost, a clumsy, annoying, and harmless guy who's basically just there for the audience to laugh at. Despite wanting to be a major threat to Amity Park, he really just comes across as a joke to both humans and ghosts.
Beware! Beware! Beware!
Danny often doesn't even catch Box Ghost on his patrols, purely because he doesn't think that he can do any harm to anyone. Though he's not the most competent character, his sheer desire to be villainous and his unsuccessful attempts to hurt others still make him a bad guy, and someone who's obviously not on the right side of the moral scale.
What do I have to do to get people to tremble around here?
If that isn't enough to convince you, in the episode Boxed Up Fury, he becomes an actual threat for the day by stealing Pandora's box and unleashing all hell upon the human world. But this being his only real feat of evil in the series makes him much more tamed compared to the other ghost. Our next pick, Freakshow, is without a doubt the most evil human character we've seen yet. Freakshow suffers from ghost jealousy, a condition that Jazz studies during the episode Reality Trip.
That's ghost envy if I've ever seen it.
I don't have ghost envy!
It's this, along with his family coming from a long line of ghost obsessives, that leads him to do a lot of terrible things. He's hypnotized and saves several ghosts to be a part of his circus, including Danny, and almost manages to force Danny to kill Sam.
Obey me, minion!
His lack of empathy towards others and reliance on dirty tricks and mind control guaranteed him to be on the lower half of our list.
Don't just stand there.
Finish them!
While Freakshow has attempted to kill and become the supposed ringmaster of all reality, he's not without a sensitive side, which Jazz does manage to bring out during their short time together. finding someone who finally understands him almost made him reconsider his actions, but it simply wasn't enough. But it's this instance of weakness that keeps him from being any more evil than Danny Phantom's other villains. Now on to a favorite amongst fans both in and out of universe, Ember McLean. She's the ghost of a punk rock star, with plans to turn everyone on Earth into mindless slaves with her music. She gains more power depending on how many people chant her name, and she's come closer to reaching world domination than almost any other evil character. Ember may not be the most intimidating ghost in the cast, but she's always a big threat whenever she makes an appearance, especially during her frequent team-ups with other ghosts.
Pucker up, kitty. We're going to Amity Park.
Unlike Freakshow or Poindexter, she's never shown any real signs of weakness, and it's her consistency and how uncaring and selfish she is that makes her a truly evil character. The one thing we can think of that might bring her down is her relationship with Skulker, and even then, they're not exactly the most loving couple in the world. Alright, we're getting into the truly evil characters of Danny Phantom, and we'll begin with a character who could very well infect your device right now as we speak, Tecna. While he tends to talk a lot and acts more bizarrely than other villains, Tecna is one of the few characters that slowly evolves to become more and more evil every time he shows up.
I am Tecna, manipulator of machines!
Literally, upgrading himself, he's constantly adapting newer forms to become as big and powerful as even some of Danny's strongest villains.
Who's your daddy?
With his ability to control all technology, his plans go from being attacks on city blocks to an entire global-scale domination of the internet. Tecna is a strange person in terms of his eccentric personality, but he's an evil genius. With enough time, he was able to deduce a 10,000 character-long code in order to access the computers in Axiom Labs, and he's outsmarted Danny and his friends countless times.
Hello, fancy satellite in space!
Though Tecna is vulnerable to be tricked, mainly involving sabotaging himself with his incredibly long speeches.
Wait! That doesn't go there!
With the internet being much bigger than it was 15 years ago, Tecna is almost certainly the most threatening villain on our list, purely through his potential damage he could do in the modern era. But even within the show, he's always been a major threat who puts himself above others, and isn't afraid to destroy anyone who gets in his way. The most reoccurring ghost in the show, and one of Danny's earliest enemies, Skulker is extremely brutal in comparison to many of his ghoulish peers. Instead of seeking world conquest, he enjoys hunting and caging other ghosts to add to his collection, like a sort of ghost-themed zoo.
Ha! At last! Time to put you in your cage.
This is made even more sinister when you realize that Skulker is hunting his own kind like animals, kind of like if a human were caging and enslaving other humans. Skulker also mentions skinning the pelts off of other ghosts, and even threatens to skin Danny alive.
I will rest your pelt at the foot of my bed.
When he's not being forced to look for information on purple-back gorillas, he's the Ghost Zone's greatest hunter, and has shown more pure bloodlust than any other character. While characters like Ember and Tecna have accomplished feats of evil on a higher scale than Skulker, we're pitting him down as more villainous through his sheer determination and genuine enjoyment in torturing and hurting others. World domination can be justified in a lust for power and fame, but the fact that Skulker does what he does, mainly just for fun, is so evil.
Skulker hunts what he hunts. Nothing more, nothing less.
It's not always about scale, folks. Sometimes the motives of a character can be enough to determine what's less moral. We have to mention the Ghost King, Pariah Dark, as he's one of the most feared and respected figures in all the Ghost Zone. Though not many of his misdeeds have been shown on screen, back in his heyday, Pariah Dark was a tyrant that ruled the Ghost Zone with an iron fist.
When wearing both, he could do anything.
He commands a large army of skeletal ghosts, and along with the Fright Knight as his loyal servant, they managed to nearly plunge the world into another era of tyranny. His rule as king of all ghosts was so destructive that a secret team of ghosts had to combine their forces in order to put a stop to his reign of terror. While we don't truly know everything there is to know about Pariah Dark, the fact that he's feared by every ghost on this list leads us to believe that whatever he's done is almost certainly worse than many of our previous entries. If you're so bad you have to be kept under lock and key for all eternity, you know they've got to be one of the darkest masters of ghosts there is. Speaking of masters, we're gonna make a slightly controversial pick and put Vlad as the second most evil character on the show above Pariah. Vlad's the main villain of the show and the driving force behind almost every subplot throughout. Vlad's actions are entirely made for his own personal gain, without remorse or empathy for anyone that gets caught in the crossfire.
These are my latest experiments. What do you think?
He's a master manipulator and has gotten far in life by using his powers to overshadow wealthy figures and force them to hand over their money, property, and valuables. Vlad is responsible for an almost immeasurable amount of conflicts, such as hiring Valerie Gray to hunt down and kill Danny, freeing Pariah Dark and unleashing him onto the world, seeking ghosts on Jack in an attempt to have him killed, creating an endless rainstorm that nearly destroyed Amity Park, creating and subsequently almost killing Danielle, and I tell you, this list just goes on forever.
Did I mention I'm a huge fan of your work?
Similar to how Danny has done the most good in our ranking, Vlad has easily done the most bad, and no other villain on this list can say they've done half the amount of sinister deeds Vlad has under his belt. You could argue that this never would have happened if Jack hadn't accidentally ruined his life by infecting him with ecnoacne. But the sheer lengths Vlad has gone to for power and revenge is overkill at best and obsessive at worst. His loneliness has led him to create a perfect hologram replica of Maddie Fenton and create several clones of Danny, only to have them melt away later.
Your resolution is much too low and your bandwidth is far too large.
His envy of Jack's life and destructive behavior towards anyone he comes in contact with makes him one of Danny Phantom's darkest characters, and certainly one of the most evil. For the numero uno most evil character in Danny Phantom is Danny Phantom. Alright, but not the one you're thinking of. We're putting Danny's alternate universe version, Dark Danny, as the most evil character in the show. Alright, but why is that? I mean, he's only been in one episode and he doesn't have the same diverse track record of bad deeds as Vlad. But that's just it. In the one episode he appears in, Dark Danny managed to accomplish so much in so little time.
I surrendered my human half a long time ago.
He's the most evil character in both scale and intentions, being a global threat who can destroy entire cities in a single move. Over the course of the episode, The Ultimate Enemy, we learn about all the messed up things he's done to the future. He's killed his own family and friends, technically twice, and even killed a human version of himself, in an event that Vlad can only describe as better left unsaid.
Some things, my boy, are better left unsaid.
He's destroyed the lives of everyone in Amity Park, as well as every ghost in the Ghost Zone. He's permanently crippled Johnny 13, destroyed Ember's vocal cords, and became the enemy to all living and non-living creatures on Earth. Dark Danny became the centerpiece of all that went wrong with the future, resulting in all of time needing to be readjusted to make sure this reality never happens.
To save the future, Danny Phantom must perish.
Pariah Dark may have been an evil tyrant that needed to be sealed away for all eternity, but Dark Danny is a being so destructive that he needed to be erased from the timeline entirely. When it comes to threat level,
what are you waiting for? It's the perfect chance to take him out.
He's the only character who reaches this high of a peak, and he's the worst it gets for Danny Phantom's villains. All because Danny decided to cheat on a test.
You're not actually thinking of peeking at the answers, are you?
Of course I am.
Alright, but what do you think? Do you agree that Dark Danny is as sinister as the show gets, or is there someone even worse out there? Make sure to binge our full Good to Evil playlist, where we explore the entire moral spectrum of your favorite cartoons, shows, and movies. But most importantly, stay wicked.